Hi there, and welcome to another Sports Abroad interview with me, Fiona Sadler. I've been so lucky to have spoken to some of the backboners of British swimming, and today is no different, albeit that this Brit has moved over to Australia. Well, I expect he's taken both his medals and his swimming ethos over there too. With 2 Olympic Games and 3 Commonwealth medals under his belt, I'm delighted to be chatting today to Jamie Salter. Hello there, Jamie. Hopefully the time difference doesn't mean that I've disturbed your sleep or anything, does it?
No, not yet. We're it is just reaching the evening here, 8 o'clock, but I do realise it's morning back home. But it's actually a pretty good time.
But I suppose the first question is that I've got to address Australia. You've been over there for 7 years now. I know you married an Australian, but was the plan always to move across the globe and kind of spread your love for swimming far and wide?
I'll be honest, I don't think it was until I married an Australian, if that makes sense. I was, a very proud Brit, born and bred just outside Birmingham in Redditch. So never envisaged that. Obviously spent a lot of time in Australia, like a lot of the Brits, training camps, etc. And I still see a lot of the guys that I swam with, who are now coaches, and coaches that I swam with, or swam under out here in Australia on camps, and we're on the Gold Coast. So I still get to see a lot of people, but no, it was I married an Australian, and she sold me on the kind of lifestyle I live in. What I do now, like 10 minutes from the beach. So it's pretty hard to resist actually when you're out here.
Well, we've got snow forecast today, so I presume it's not the same over there, is it? You've got a pretty snazzy title too, because you are General Manager of Performance Pathway for Swim Australia, which I imagine means you're involved with developing the talent. But can you give us a bit more of an insight into what you do over there?
Yeah, no, I mean, pretty simply, my job is to identify, develop, and then transition athletes and coaches and support staff like sports science staff and medical staff onto the senior team, and then for them to be successful at senior level for us, obviously for Australia. So pretty simply identify, develop, and transition. Obviously, it does get more complex than that when you start to operationalize it. It's Australia's a pretty big country. The way I can explain it is, I could drive when I worked in the UK, living in Birmingham, living in Loughborough, drive 2 hours, you can pretty much get most of the way around the UK. I pretty much now have to fly for like an hour and a half, or that gets me to Sydney. 5 hours gets me to Perth. That's the equivalent of flying from the UK to Greece. So my job is basically, to look at athletes and coaches and staff literally all around Europe. That's the geography I have to deal with in my role.
That is incredible. And I love that they've got a Brummie heading up that over in Australia. But how big is swimming as a sport over there? Would you say it's more popular than it is in Britain because of obviously the facilities they've got and the outdoor stuff? Is there more of an investment there as well financially, do you reckon?
Swimming's massive. I think similar to the UK, people navigate into swimming for lifestyle reasons and health reasons, i.e. learn to swim for safety, right? And that's the same over here. It's also more prevalent because of obviously every major city is on the coast. So you've got that whole surf life-saving aspect. So the number of people that are getting wet, want of a better word, and the safety rolled on that means it does get a lot of people, whether they're directly involved in swimming in the pool or swimming in terms of life-saving. Yeah, it's pretty massive. With regard to investment, I'd say in terms of our high performance program, I think we roughly get, the pounds to dollars equivalent. I think we roughly get the same amount as, say, British Swimming get in high performance department. But then having worked in both systems, having worked in the UK sports system and now the Australian system, I do know there's a lot more investment spent in the UK with like England, Scotland and Wales with lottery money compared to what our participation levels are in Australia. But it's still, the facilities one is an interesting one. When I first arrived, they asked me to do a presentation on the comparisons and the points of difference between UK and Australia. And I did ask, I asked facilities manager in Swimming Australia, how many 50-metre pools are there in Australia? Thinking, be whatever. And he wrote back in an email, 541. I said, no, not all swimming pools, 50-metre swimming pools. And he said, yeah, 541. Now, that is, like, I couldn't comprehend that when I first arrived. And literally, I live on the Gold Coast. There's probably 11 or 12 within, 20, 30 miles of where I live. So there's a lot of 50-metre pools in
Which
Australia.
is
I think that does
great
help.
if you love long course. Maybe not so great for me. I'm more of a short course kind of girl. But in your role, you coordinate the swim camps as well with Sports Abroad. Why is it then, when in Australia, where, as you said, you've got loads of these outside facilities, fantastic pools and things, why would you encourage your swimmers to go on these camps? What is the benefit, do you think, that they get from it?
Well, in high performance, I mean, we're quite isolated where we are in Australia. Do you know what I mean? It's you're talking the 7-8 hour flight just to get out of Australia, to get to even the closest, you know, country like Singapore, or, you know, just under Asia, 9 hours to Japan. So we've got to get. We obviously don't necessarily go away for the warm weather training camps or the outdoor facilities. We go away to get used to traveling overseas and going to those different countries. We got to get well versed at understanding how to travel, how best to recover when you land, and that sort of stuff, and all the things you need to do so that when you land, you can train or you can race in a competition and perform well.
I never ever thought about that, to be fair. But as you can say, you know, jet lag and everything, you really need to get used to that. But
Yeah.
obviously, you've been on your fair share of camps. Just before we started recording, you were telling me about some stories and things that stand out.
Yeah.
Is there a place that stands out for you? And you know, what's your best memory from some of your camps?
Yeah, I don't think there was ever one venue or one location that really, you know, drew to me. As I said, and I think Adam Rookwood said it yesterday. He did a lot of stuff on the Gold Coast, and he's right. And I still go to those pools that we all trained at, and did all those, you know, all those meters, many, you know, probably 20 years ago now that we were doing all those laps. So I don't really want to do that anymore. So yeah, Australia, you know, it was quite comforting coming here because I could actually drive around the Gold Coast and I knew exactly where I was going and where the swimming pools were. I actually think with Steve as well, we did a lot of camps in South Africa. I think we were the first British group in the early 2000s to do a lot of camps in South Africa. And if I remember rightly, we'd finished a week of training, and where we were in Pretoria, it's got a slight element of altitude, so it really does sting at the end of a session or even the end of a set. And I remember we got to the end of the week, we'd finished, it was Saturday morning, we were all happy, and then our coach turned around and said, "Oh, by the way, I've entered you in an open water swim in a dam, and you're all doing it, no questions." So that wasn't what we wanted to hear. But then I think we turned up and we did win a bit of prize money, which we donated to the city anyway. So it was good.
Well, that is, yeah, everything has a nice silver lining there, doesn't it? And you told me that you were the fall guy for everybody because you were always the youngest on the team. Is that true?
I was back in '94. I think there was I think it was a story that Adam mentioned around. I think I helped him navigate back into the village after he'd celebrated his Commonwealth gold medal, and I had the pleasure of again chaperoning Steve when he injured himself. He actually did injure himself at those Commonwealth Games in '94. He hired a bike, I think, and then I remember we went past him in a taxi and he was on the bike, and I remember looking back and he hit something, whether it was a drain, but he almost did, you know, a 360 in the air with the bike landed and then did his leg in. So I think I had to pretty much push him around in a wheelchair for the closing ceremony. I think that's what I remember.
He did say that you were the one that basically got him through there. You've ticked off all the major aspirations of any swimmer, not one, but 2 Olympics under your belt. But if you had to choose between Atlanta in 1996 and Sydney in 2000, which would you say was your favourite?
Probably the last one, Sydney. Not because Atlanta was fantastic as well. I think any Olympics you go to is rewarding when you know, there's nothing better than putting on your tracksuit of the nation that you represent. So it was a very proud moment. Well, for me, for my family, for my parents watching. Atlanta was fantastic. You know, America now put on, you know, a good Olympics, and we'll see that again in 2028. And then Sydney I was just that, you know, 4 years older, 4 years more experienced, knew what it was all about. Not could enjoy it just as much, but actually did all my best times. I mean, my best time still stands from, you know, lane 7 of that Olympic final, when everyone else was, you know, breaking world records as well. So that, you know, and even when I go and visit that pool in Sydney, it's exactly the same as what it was 20 years ago. So it brings back a lot of fond memories. So for me, yeah, Sydney Olympics was a good one. I think actually, you know, London modelled a lot of the infrastructure that Sydney put in, and you can probably see there'll be other nations that copy, you know, what Sydney did and London did, you know, for years to come, I think.
And obviously racing against the Thorpedo, Ian Thorpe. What was that like? Was that a career highlight for you? Was obviously now like he's a legacy, isn't he? And you actually got to race against him.
Yeah, he probably wouldn't remember racing against me much. I was pretty far behind, like most people were in the rest of the world. Um, it it was a good benchmark. I think in the era that I was swimming, I came on, and Kieran Perkins was the best athlete in the world at the time, and then came Grant Hackett, and then came Ian Thorpe, and then, by that time I'd been 10 years as senior athlete, and then just as you think they're about to retire, then Michael Phelps comes on in the 200 free, and I'm like, okay, right, I'm done. There's enough legends that have won multiple gold medals and world records. I think, I think I was probably swimming in the wrong generation. Maybe I needed 4 years before all that, or 4 years or 8 years after it, but it wasn't to be. But it was being in that final. I think what I remember about that race was the crowd knew what race it was. There was 2 Aussies in it. There was Thorpe and there was Hackett, and there was a race that happened before it. The crowd, you could hear the crowd mumbling from the race before and talking about the result, and then it went deadly silent. Nobody told the crowd to be quiet, but they knew exactly what was coming. Yeah. And then the announcer boomed over the tannoy, and now the men's 200 freestyle, and the place erupted. I remember walking out along the poolside to behind the block. I couldn't hear my footsteps. I couldn't hear them. It was like someone had a megaphone in my ear, and it was just noise. It was so surreal. It was like I was in a bubble. I couldn't hear myself unzipping my tracksuit. I couldn't hear anything until the whistle goes and you stand on the block. And I had actually shaved my head, so I had no hair anywhere, less hair than I have now. And whatever it was standing up. My hair was standing up on the back of my head. And I suppose, if I was to give any message to anyone that wants to compete at the highest level, that's why you do it, because it was such a rush and it was absolutely fantastic. And that's probably why Sydney's my favourite.
And it stays with you for your entire life. Amazing.
Exactly.
And obviously we have to sort of think about this year. It's been unlike any other with COVID. Here in the UK, the pools have started to reopen, but masters sessions are still being halted under COVID regulations. How's it been in Australia with the whole coronavirus?
We went pretty hard and pretty strict right from the start. And it's not just in swimming. I think in any walk of life, in the retail industry, food retail as well, and domestic travel, it was a pretty severe lockdown, and borders are only just starting to open up now. But I'd say normal life probably was able to kick back in fairly well, probably after about 2 to 3 months, including swimming pools. There were restrictions on, a bit like back home. Yeah. Number of people in the pool, maybe 10, 20 people, and that grew as the different tiers disappeared. But certainly, I was aware of a lot of our swimmers did jump in the ocean to do some.
Was
some
that
training.
Legal? Were you allowed to do that?
Yeah, we were, as long as you kept distances, because we weren't totally isolated to your house, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, you could go 5 or 10 kilometers over here. You could go 5 or 10 kilometers from your house. Well, you're at a beach, so you kind of met it, and you're pretty much isolated, other than, should we say, some of the marine life that tends to float around the Gold Coast. A couple of great white sharks every now and then. So I think we were quite fortunate. So because we went so hard and so strict for quite a long time, it meant that there was a bit of a kickback in Melbourne, where they had to go into a second lockdown, but pretty much we were able to get back to some normality definitely by July. So you're talking 3 or 4 months where it was pretty strict.
Yeah, I mean, we were all right in the UK with open water swimming in the first lockdown, but in this one, it's been far too cold. But have you had the problems over there? Like, we're facing so many pools potentially closing. Do you think that that's because we've handled it badly and the Aussies have handled it better, or is that kind of happening over there as well?
No, it is happening. It is happening over here, like it is back home. I think a lot of the pools here, some of them linked to schools and universities and then councils, and they have been able to look after it rather than being a private enterprise, etc. There were some programs where the pool rent had to be paid, and it probably put the clubs at risk. I think there was a lot more risk of clubs being shut down than necessarily the facilities. I think the running costs sometimes, especially where I am in Queensland, where it is quite warm, even during winter, you can still train outdoors, and there's not the cost of trying to heat the place, or heat inside, heat the water, etc. So I think some of the running costs are probably a little bit cheaper. than back home. But certainly there were bits at risk, and more risk in Melbourne, where there was still a more severe lockdown. But certainly, I think we've pretty much managed to get through the worst of it. Touch wood.
Yeah, touch wood, exactly. Because you don't want a generation of lost swimmers just because of 1 year. And the question I've got for you now is, what advice would you give to swimmers that have been completely disrupted by, the coronavirus and everything, and have had to sort of stop their training and things like that? And particularly for the younger ones, what advice would you give them that can just kind of spur them on? I know it's only a year in their life and everything like that. Have you got any potential advice?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of things swimmers can do, especially if they're young, if they're anywhere between 10, kind of 16 or 17. They've still got a lot of growth to do. You'll probably find that they'll get a lot more sleep, and they'll probably shoot up quite a few centimeters. So that's a good thing. It gives them a chance to regenerate. So for a younger athlete, even if it's 3 or 4 months, they're not going to lose a lot in terms of when they get to adulthood. They'll still be able to catch it back up. They can do a lot of stuff, I think, in terms of land work, just making sure that what I call the functional movement stuff, which can then help them on in when they become kind of an older swimmer, a bit like when you're going for the Olympics and you want to get as strong as Adam Pieter, you need to do a lot of stuff earlier on, just to prepare you for that kind of strength training. So they can do a lot of that, and they can do that in their own time. For me, I think the one is, and this is why I think things like this are really important. I've done 2 of these webinars as well with 2 of my swimming clubs in the UK, Redditch, where I'm still a life member, in the city of Birmingham, because they mean a lot to me. So the most important thing I think for these young swimmers is to stay connected with their teammates, because we were having a little bit of banter with Steve a minute ago, and obviously there's still a bit of banter that goes on through text message with me and Ruckers and Parry. So I think that connection is probably the thing that the swimmers and the clubs and the parents need to keep hold of more than anything, because I think that's the bit that I'm more concerned of, the well-being part, than the training part.
Fantastic. And obviously, you're very good at what you do. So if you are a swimmer and you are slightly worried, then take heed of that information. And to finish off, it is tradition for us to do a set of 5 quick fire questions, Jamie. We like to call it our final 5 meters. I'd expect you to be very good at this. Nice, strong finish. Are you ready?
Yeah, far away. So,
question 1, will you be cheering at the Olympic Games for Team GB or Team Australia?
Both. Got a lot of time in Australian athletes, and got a lot of invested time with a lot of the swimmers that I know from the UK. So it's always both.
You dodged a bullet there. And are there any specific Australian habits that maybe we don't have over here in the UK when it comes to swimming, like maybe your diet or anything like that?
No, I actually think swimming is a universal language. Doesn't matter what country you're from. It's fiercely competitive before you dive in, but afterwards everyone gets on like a house on fire. Just look at some of the stuff you've seen from the ISL, where you got different athletes from different nations mixing together. So that's proof in the pudding that I think of all the sports, swimming is the most friendly. So that's my view on that.
Totally agree. And do the Aussies focus on land training as much as we do in the UK, or because you've just got a beach 5 minutes down the road, is it more to do with the actual in the water stuff?
Nah, it'd be the same as the UK. It'd be very balanced. It'd be on the needs of the individual. So if they're doing more sprint orientated events, then it'd be a heavy land base, and if it's distance, it'd be maybe slight less. But to be honest, the land work, the way I look at the land work and the way we look at the land work is around providing you the robustness to cope with the stuff in the pool. So what you don't want is days lost to injury and illness. So the more robust an athlete is, the more they'll cope with the training demand, the more it'll help them in performances in the long run.
Fantastic. And who would you say was your favourite swimming buddy back when you were training?
Hey, look, Parry said it yesterday, and he knows it, and he's probably going to gloat about it, but it's probably Ruckers. Right, Ruckers. Parry said it. He taught him everything you need to know. Adam taught me as a young kid what you needed to do day in, day out. Said it. I was best man at his wedding. I said the same thing then. Said the same thing now. He's probably the one that taught me what it takes. And lessons learned as a 16-year-old. Even if it was kind of staggering back in with him at Commonwealth Games after he won.
Totally the fall guy, weren't you? Every time. Yeah. So would you say that Australians have a natural advantage in swimming because of the outdoor facilities, because of the weather and everything like that? Is it more innate in them?
Yeah, I think that helps. I mean, the facilities, as I said, there's a massive amount of 50-meter pools, which is a point of difference, I think, between Australia and probably the rest of the world. Coaching experience is really high here. Virtually every coach I chat to has delivered Olympic, World, Commonwealth, Pan Pac, you name it, medals. Yeah. So there's other than America, Australia is the second highest medal winning nation at the Olympics. So there's a lot of history and experience that's been passed through generation to generation, and that's certainly something I noticed when I first arrived. So I think it's more that at the moment than anything else.
Have you ever been swimming in the last few weeks? Do you still keep up with your stroke?
You know what? During lockdown, I'm not a big fan of swimming up and down a pool. So I've done two lots of 12-week ocean swim work. I swim 3 times a week in the ocean. So I get up at like 4, a stupid clock. I mean, I'm in the ocean at 5:30 in the morning. I swim for an hour, and the guys that do it take us complete our comfort zone. And I regretted doing this, but I downloaded an app called Dorsal Fin, and it shows you all the shark sightings that are around. And I'll be honest with you, I nearly passed out because everywhere I swim in the mornings, there's sharks all around where I am. I haven't seen one yet, and I'm telling you, one day we did a simple warm up, just got past the wave break, and then the coach, who was on and there's 60 of us, yeah, and then the coach on a paddleboard went, right, we're going that way, and you're going to swim for 6 minutes, and I swam out past the shark nets, so it's probably 400 or 500 meters off, and I was pretty uncomfortable out there like that.
So. Yeah, it would be a no from me. It's not exactly what you get in Stockport, I can tell you that. But Jamie, it's been so interesting to hear all about how you're faring over the other side of the pond, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you've kept your British accent. Thank you very much for that as well. Doing it for us, Brits. Keep doing what you're doing, and if you could send us a bit of sunshine our way as well, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you, Jamie.
No problem. Thank you very much.